Hi everyone and welcome to week one. I hope you've had a bit of a time to have a look around the site and that you're getting familiar with all the different aspects of the subject for this semester. So just to give you a bit of a update on what's happening in week one, and if you've read the week one material, this will be redundant, but it might be useful for those of you that haven't started the week one material yet. So one of the main things that you're going to do this week is you're going to get familiar with everything that's on the website. You're going to look at a couple of reports, one from the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare and the other one from the Grattan Institute. And that's a really important report because it will set the foundation for you to go through and complete your assessment 1.2, which is the Board of Directors presentation that you'll have to do. So I think one of the things you might have noticed in the chronic conditions self-management subject is that we spend a lot of time thinking about the differences and sometimes the similarities between chronic conditions and chronic illness. So the focus of this subject is really around the self-management of chronic conditions, and as you'll see in the Grattan Institute report by Hal Swearison and Stephen Duckett, they talk a lot about the failures of the healthcare system when it comes to self-management of chronic conditions. Now we know that we are living longer lives, and many of us will live with a range of chronic conditions as we age, and the cost to the healthcare system of looking after people with those conditions is enormous and growing all the time. So it's really important for health professionals and governments and for people living with chronic conditions that they get a good understanding of self-management because it saves money, and many of the admissions to hospital that you will have noticed in the Grattan Institute report are actually preventable. So one of the things, the key aspects of the report is that we're really, as a health system, quite poorly set up to manage our own chronic conditions. And, there's many reasons why more than 250,000 people end up in hospital from what would be seen to be preventable preventable illness from chronic conditions that aren't well managed. So it's sometimes good to think about how this relates to you or some people that you might know or some people in your family. Some of you will have a chronic condition, some of you will have family members who have a chronic condition. And think about, how you manage your own chronic condition or how the people around you manage their chronic conditions. And there's many reasons why people don't self-manage particularly well. Some of that's about things like health literacy, some of that's about access, some of that's about understanding, it's about education, a whole range of things. And those things sort of put together under one umbrella are often what we refer to as the social determinants of health. And we know that they can have a huge impact on the ability of people to actually self-manage a chronic condition. Think about what you might see as a health professional. Many of you are going to be working in allied health disciplines. Some of you will be working under the biomedical model, perhaps being nurses or doctors or paramedics. But many of you will be working in health promotion and some of those other disciplines that sit alongside of that. Think about it, what it's like, as a health professional where we see someone who has a poorly managed chronic condition. And I always like to draw on the example of somebody who has asthma. Many of us know somebody who has asthma, or we may have asthma ourselves or have a child that has asthma. So under the biomedical model, a person with asthma or a child with asthma often will come into the emergency department. So there'll be a presentation to the emergency department. And that, could be a life-threatening issue. So the nurses and the doctors and the paramedics will go into dealing with that asthma attack sometimes in a very biomedical way. They'll make sure that the person gets oxygen if they need it, maybe some Ventolin, whether they have a self-management plan or are taking a preventer at this stage is not really talked about until the person's stabilised. So, that happens, and, the child will come in and they'll get all of the things that they need to improve their breathing. They may get some prednisolone, some sort of long-term corticosteroid to take home, and then they'll be discharged back to their house. And one of the things that we know is often if people have a chronic condition like asthma that's poorly managed, we'll probably end up seeing them back in the ED sometime in the near future. So, it's using the biomedical approach to dealing with something like asthma. We're very good at giving people Ventolin and making sure that they've got prednisolone and all the things that they need. to fix that immediate crisis. But some things that we're not very good at is making sure that that person is not then readmitted because they're not self-managing, or that their family's not managing the condition themselves. So things like an asthma plan, looking at some of the environmental determinants, things like, are the people in the house smoking? Are there pets in the home? Does the child have allergies? Is there good ventilation? All of those things can have an impact on that person's ability to manage their own chronic condition. Okay, so as we move through week one, I want you to have a really good read of that chronic condition self-management report put out by the Grattan Institute in 2016. You'll also have a quiz to do at the end of this week, so make sure you get that done. I think you've got until week 3 to complete that. I also like to draw your attention to the discussion boards that I've set up. So I've set up probably, I think it's 5 different discussion boards. One of them is for general unit discussions, so general questions you have about everyday type of things. And I've set up 1 discussion board for each assessment. That just keeps it a little bit tidy and sort of helps us to answer your questions. So if you have a question about assignment 1.2 and you post it on that discussion board, then everybody else who probably has a similar question can see what the answer was, and that will save us repeating the same sorts of things over and over again. And as we go through the subject over the semester, the discussion boards can get quite unwieldy, and it can get really difficult to find things. So I think setting up these smaller discussion boards will help us to keep track of what's actually going on. Okay, so that's probably all I've got to talk to you about this week. So make sure you get in there, engage with the material, use the little tick boxes that we have at the top of the each of the modules so you can tick off the things that you've done. Reflect on your own learning, and if you have any questions, make sure you post them on the discussion board. And we'll talk to you again next week, where we talk about assessment 1.2. Thanks. See you next time.